Start.
Sure.
They say that in December, some say that it will be the end of the world. Like, and if you had the opportunity to write the soundtrack for that end of the world, what would it sound like?
It'd be very nice. It'd be very pretty.
Hmm.
I think we're fine. I think human beings have a bunch of really nice things inside. And I think at the core, I think human beings aren't dark, honestly. I think that the mob mentality puts us into a position where we think that our core is dark, but I think our core is actually very loving. So I'd write something pretty.
Hmm.
However, all that conspiracy, shit, it's, I got a tour to do next year, so I can't die this year, I'm afraid.
You're out with a new album. What was going in your state of mind when you were writing it?
Well, I think Epicloud is it's a very positive sounding record, and I think it makes some people happy to hear it. I know it makes me happy to hear it, and I think what I was consciously trying to do was make a statement that had that at its core, that it was focusing on positive things. I think when everybody gets afraid and when life becomes very unsure, it's very easy to write hateful and dark music, and I've done that for a lot of times, right? But this time I really tried to make a conscious effort to not do that, because I honestly feel that whatever you throw out there is what you're going to resonate with, right? And so this is what I chose to do. And I think that it wasn't the easiest thing to do, because there was moments while I was doing that I just felt like shit, right? So, but ultimately, I think it's a healthy thing for me to be doing at this point in my life.
Staying positive and metal music, it's not the combination that we are used to. How did you come up to this idea?
I think that the concepts that are the heaviest ones are often love or peace, because a lot of people hear those and they think of the whole hippie thing.
Hmm.
But I think in order to actually love anything, you have to be vulnerable, right? And being vulnerable is terrifying. It's a lot easier to be like, oh, I hate everything, because then you're protected. No one has to know that perhaps you're sensitive, or perhaps you're, you know, not a terrible person, right? But I think because vulnerability is just so uncool, a lot of people sort of put that whole thing into, the category of a weakness of some part. But I just totally disagree. I think in order to learn how to love anything effectively, you have to be strong. And I think that the sound of heavy music is strong. I mean, and I think it can be very strong. So combining those two things seems very, very obvious to me, I guess.
Through the years, you gained a lot of followers, and how did they react to this change?
Some people like it, some people hate it. I mean, ultimately it's one record in 25 records, and what I'm doing next is nothing like it, right? So everything I do is an experiment in some way. And Epicloud, as much as I sort of beak on about this whole love thing and vulnerability and everything, it's not a mission statement. It's that record. What happens when I write is something will compel me to follow a train of thought for whatever reason. It could be environmental, it could be personal, but if I'm compelled to write something, I tend to follow that and then try and mine that vein for everything it's worth. And if it leads to those concepts like Epicloud or Ziltoid or strapping or whatever, I follow it. And at the end of it, I'll listen to it and sort of try and analyze it. And so, a lot of times people will say, okay, well, this new record, is this a definition of you, or is this a definition of what you plan to do? And it isn't. It's just a moment, And what I'm doing next after Epicloud is very dark, right? So, who knows?
Do you think that people, musicians in metal, do they experiment?
Some.
Do they experiment to that point that you can say that the music progresses?
Some. I think that it's difficult to say that you're a heavy metal musician and be taken seriously in any form, right? I mean, I choose to think that what I do, although much of what I've done in the past is heavy metal, as I get older, I like to think of my experience in heavy music as being a component in a bunch of experimental things that may or may not end up being viewed as heavy metal, right? But it's sort of an uphill battle to try and fight that, you know? It's like, you know, to try and change people's perspective of what heavy music is, again, isn't my goal. I'm not on a mission to do any of that shit. I'm trying to write music, right? But in terms of other people and how their experimentations affect or don't affect what the perception of metal is, I mean, I don't really know. Yeah.
What kind of music influenced you the most?
Stuff that I don't write. I like electronic music probably more
Really?
than anything else, yeah.
Which DJs, musicians, and how do you see this whole massive production that
I love
is
it.
really?
Well, I mean, in terms of it, the record I guess I listened to most last year was a record by a guy named John Hopkins, and the record was called Insides, and it was amazing, right? And the production and everything. I have to say that the whole dubstep thing I'm a little tired of, right? It's like,
Yes, they all used it to this point.
I mean, it's cool, don't get me wrong, but I always found it really dark, and that's not what I'm looking for. In fact, I really like that sort of late 90s sort of house thing. I love that, you know, like the Tiesto and all that. I love that kind of constant stream of really trancey. I love that, right? You know, Deadmau5 too, that sort of the Canadian stuff, and I love the visuals and the production. I love that, right? And other than that, I mean, I like folk music and the real primitive stuff, right? I really like the early 20s blues and the, you know, the Americana kind of rockabilly thing, and I do like country music, I guess, if it's the old stuff. I like some classical, I guess, but not a lot. And experimental stuff. I still really like Old Lady Drivers and the Young Gods and things like that. I tend to go back to that. And Captain Beefheart, I love that stuff, right? So.
Do you still hate doing interviews?
No, I like doing it.
Really?
Yeah.
I read somewhere that you don't like.
I think the problem with, you know, this career is I've been, not a problem, but a reality, a funny one, is that I've been doing interviews for 22 years.
Mhm.
Sometimes 4 or 5 a day. And sometimes people will read an interview I did 10 years ago where I was in a bad mood or I was in, you know, and they'll say, well, you know, someone said at one point you did an interview, you said your favorite color is green. And I'm like, yeah, it isn't anymore. I don't know what to say, right? Like, everybody changes, right?
Yes. Thank you very much.
You're
for
welcome.
this
Thank you.
quick conversation.
Awesome. Yeah.
Can
Thank
I
you.
just ask